I would like to bring in my next guest again, another favorite of the show. It seems like I only bring on favorites. Koffi Kouakou. He is African Analyst, Senior Research Fellow for the Center for Africa-China Studies at the University of Johannesburg. Koffi, welcome back, man. How you doing today? You doing all right? Wait, I can't hear you. Say it one more time. Oh, I can't hear you. I can't hear you. Volume. But there's something going on with the
Can
mic.
you hear me now?
Oh, now I can hear you. There you are.
Yes, sorry, it was my fault. I didn't have the mic on. It was muted.
Oh, you're perfectly fine. How you doing today, man? You doing all right?
Doing really well. The weather here is pretty nice. It's been raining for a while, but today is very sunny, very bright.
Here.
And
you're in South
cool.
Africa, correct?
Yes, I'm in what's called Pretoria, or Tswane in local language.
Okay. So one of the things that apparently has taken place is Donald Trump has killed USAID. And there's, correct me if I'm wrong, a conversation in South Africa about the fact that Trump has killed USAID. What is going on with this in South Africa? Because look, my take on USAID is we use this stuff for regime change. I accept that there may be a portion of it that goes towards helping, whether it's feeding or something else. But we use it to overthrow governments. We use it to overthrow Ukraine. We use it to put pressure on Georgia. We use it to screw around in Romania. So I am decisively negative on the usage of U.S. aid, especially if it's going to be used in that way. How is it used in South Africa?
Well, I mean, I would agree with you. Many of us have seen the kind of information that came about on USAID. It's sort of a hodgepodge, as much as many of us had benefited a bit from USAID in the old days. But when the truth came out, it was quite a shock to many people who benefit from it, especially people in the health area, like the PEPFAR, the president thing in the US, to deal with HIV/AIDS and so forth. And the health area has been really hit hard. So at first it was quite a shock. It's still a shock. However, very slowly, you could hear people, not just nationalists or Pan-Africans, but people who have a sense of sovereignty, start to come out of the very tough narrative and say, wait a minute, you better take care of yourself, have your own money. There's plenty of money in South Africa. I mean, the amount of money that was sent from USAID, it's just some money that you could use, you could find in South Africa in your budget. And in fact, very quickly, the Treasury here, Treasury Department, has been making some really sound, proposal, rational ones, saying that they will be able to take care of that. So I think the shock is still there. The only thing is, from most of our governing leaders, they always react, and they react very slowly. So many people might suffer from this sort of shock, and then say, okay, what do we get the ARV medicine, and what kind of support we need? So that's the only concern, really. If not, in terms of money, the South African government will just come very quickly and fill that vacuum very quickly. But it does have impact on other things as well. All kinds of other aids have been frozen; they're not coming anymore. But many of us are saying, wait a minute, it's time that Africans have a sense of the real sovereignty, and not having what I call, I've shared that with you before, it's what I call the begging bowl syndrome. Now, the golden begging bowl syndrome, where the beggar is begging with a golden bowl, doesn't realize that he's got a bowl and that he's got more than what he's really looking for. So he must reset his mental mindset to say, wait a minute, I'm wealthy enough. Why am I in the begging bowl business?
Yeah.
So that syndrome is still there. And I think to a certain degree, I was talking to a colleague this afternoon here in South Africa, and he's just saying, wait a minute, I think President Trump, to a certain degree, as much as he looked a little bit reckless and somehow, very bullish on things and bullying people, he must be, or might be, if we look at it very closely, a very helpful guy to Africa. And I think slowly things are moving to that point where people are saying, we can take care of ourselves. Thanks for all the things you've done to us, the United States, all these days. But I think we're going to look into it for ourselves
I'm curious on Trump from other perspectives. Like, how is South Africa looking at Trump? I mean, granted, Elon Musk is the lackey in the background. He's South African. Um, I suspect he may have certain ideas about. Let me explain what I mean. I met a guy once. Well, I guess these are two questions. Let me go to the first question first. How does South Africa view him? Like, from an external point of view, looking at the United States, what is the impression of the US from South Africa, especially with Trump in power?
now. I would say there are many views. The three that I've noticed as an observer, the majority of the views really seem as somebody who really seem to be focusing on his country, you know.
Yeah.
America first, very important, is isolating himself from the rest of the world and pulling away from most of these international global organizations that tend to stifle, the progress of most countries. And they're saying, wait a minute, what is he doing? Is he pulling out the UN, the World Bank as well, the IMF, and all these institutions, World Health Organization, perhaps UNESCO again, and so forth. So this sort of distancing is just a little bit of concern from many people who've seen the U.S. as a sort of a very um, outgoing nation that had a lot of relationship with the rest of the world. I mean, that was what justified the hegemonic power of the U.S.
Yeah.
But people are now also realizing that hegemonic sort of hard power has really been brutalized many countries, destroy them, creating all sorts of chaos that made many countries not really live up to what they're supposed to be living up to: well-being, peace in the countries, decent democratic institutions, and then of course freedom to do what they're supposed to do and who they're supposed to be. And these parts are really, it's not confusing to people. People are now saying, hey, they've got this guy. And they also have an early picture of President Trump when he was, I think, 45, number 45 in the US, President 45. He never visited the country and he made some disparaging comment that I'm not going to try to repeat here. But to a certain degree, people took a seat back again and say, wait a minute, he seemed to have a point because this continent should have been working better if we didn't have those leaders who are kowtowing to, these imperialists. Of course, you also got to attribute the fault to his country and the Europeans. But people are saying, you know, he may have a point. Our leaders must get their act together, fix things like water, schools, infrastructure. I mean, the basic necessity of a functioning modern state. Our leaders are struggling with this electricity. I mean, here's you get this huge African continent, and then you have another country, China, which is about 3 times smaller than Africa, and is getting its act right. It's a leader in energy, 10 years ahead of most countries in the world. So what you might want to probably do as an African leader is say, wait a minute, China, how did you do that? Can you help us fix these things?
Yeah.
But nothing. So people are looking at these kind of things, but they're doing a bit of comparative analysis. But most important, many are happy that the United States will leave Africa alone so that they're meddling, they're sort of getting into putting a regime change and so forth,
Mhm.
may not come as strong as they used to come in the old days. I think that's a part of the relief, but we're not quite sure yet with Trump because we don't know what he's going to do in the next
Yeah.
couple of years. But
Yeah.
there are also a
Of
small
course.
group of South Africans, South African whites, the Afrikaners, some of the Afrikaners of AfriForum or Solidarity, those lobbying groups who have been pushing their, influence peddling in Washington. I think one of the, defunct leaders just now had a meeting and met with Tucker Carlson for more than an hour, an interview. I mean, the kind of things he was saying there. There's a bit of truth, but overall, there's so many displaced and misplaced things that you're saying that it gives South Africa a very
Explain.
strange picture.
Yeah, explain that, because Tucker Carlson has a huge footprint, and if he's
Mhm.
having an interview, and look, Tucker Carlson, even he is problematic, even though he gets things right. Like, for example, one of the things behind the scenes during January 6th, he says something like, "White men shouldn't act this way." It's like, what? What? It's like, I have a higher opinion of white men as opposed to acting this way. Or
Yeah.
recently, in one of his interviews, he says something like, "Hey, what's wrong with white people having a state of their own? What's wrong with that? What's wrong with that?" That's a weird thing to say, right? It's like, is that it's like people say the N word. I remember one of the they were talking to African American, and he says, "Yeah, but why can't white people say the N word?" And the guy was like, "You want to say it?" He said, "No." Well, you clearly sound like you want to say it. It feels like that, right? Where it's like the very fact that you're saying, "Why can't white people just have a place where we can just be white?" Feels super weird to me.
Yeah.
But that's the stuff
Yeah.
that Tucker Carlson says. So it's not shocking that Tucker Carlson will have a white Afrikaner on the show
Yeah.
saying outlandish stuff. So I just want to
Mhm.
preface with that. What was he saying? And give me your response to it, because I
Yeah.
didn't see the
My
interview.
my take, I mean, I just got turned off by the beginning of the show. So I
Yeah,
struggled to get through it. So the first 5 minutes or so, I'm like, let me listen to this again. I'm gonna listen to this again, but I just couldn't go through it because Tucker is so poorly educated about South
right,
Africa.
right.
And then the race issue that took place, and I mean the brutal race issue that of apartheid that took place in this country. And it doesn't seem like these people have a sense of pain, a legacy of pain that Black people are still carrying
They
on their
don't.
backs every day. They don't have that sense.
They don't.
And that sort of they need some sensitivity training per se to a certain degree to be able to understand the story and have some kind of compassion for Black people who've been treated like animals
Yeah,
for
they don't.
400 years. I mean, this is a huge burden on the back of people in their DNA. So when a small group of people trying to flip the script and make people believe that, oh, by the way, we're now, and that's what Tucker was saying, that, white people are under now racism. They're suffering
Yep.
from racism in Africa. I mean, you just sit down and say, wait a minute, is Tucker really real about what he's saying? And you understand, if you've been an observer or somebody who's lived here for a while or many years, like I have for 30 years or so, that he just doesn't, he's uneducated, but at the same time, he doesn't have the sort of sentiment to understand the pain people have gone through and
Yes.
what they carry. And all these, there's so many trigger moments when a white person goes on social media, Twitter and X, and then just attacks Black people without context. It's just painful for many people. They'll spend a week on it, right? Think about it. So the guy was being interviewed by Tucker. His name, I think, Ernst Woods. He used to belong to, I think, AfriForum, and he resigned 10 days or a week or 2 weeks ago. And for some reason, I think they've been under pressure. And in fact, there's mounting pressure against them. There's a petition that's been going on this past week to take these two organizations, sort of Afrikaner white minority group influence, to a case of treason. And
Really?
yes, a serious one. But it's going to be a bit tough because a case of treason, there are a couple of elements that makes it a little bit tricky to pull these guys and then sort of charge them with it. And they
Wait,
have
why
very powerful.
treason? Treason usually indicates that they're working with a foreign country against their own. Why treason?
Exactly. That's the first one, that you would consort with a foreign power to overthrow the power of your own country. And one
Yes.
part of that is that this group of Afrikaners have asked the United States to come after the African national leaders, African National Congress leaders. That's a form of overthrow to
Yeah.
deal with them. They have a point in the sense that there are many things that are not working, corruptions are not, so nobody's dealing with the people who are being corrupt enough. But they're taking it the wrong way. They need to find another way, but not call Trump to come with the guns and get rid of
Right. Right.
Yes, because that's the kind of mentality they have. They sort the problem by the barrel of the gun,
Oh, that's
either
outrageous.
attacking. Yeah, so a little bit outrageous, but they have, from time to time, they tend to have a point when things are not working, basic things that the African National Congress should be sorting out, And this is where, many of us are saying, wait a minute, let's listen to these people. What do they have to say? But I think they went overboard for that.
Kofi, go into that for me. I don't understand. The African National Congress had 30 years. They had the full support of the public. They were the vanguards of the revolution in regards to eliminating the apartheid state of South Africa.
And majority in parliament, by the way.
And overwhelming majority in parliament. Why haven't, meaning they've had absolute power to fix these items. Why haven't they?
Well, I mean, there are many explanations, but the one thing that I've come up to talk about now is there is a sense, when you study human beings, and then that's why psychology is very important, the understanding of human beings. And it seems those who are fighting, they're fighting for an ideal for which thousands of people died for. And those who managed to survive, for some reason, when they came back home, they just couldn't resist the attraction of the material lives that the white people were living. It's like you have slaves and say, I want to live like a master. And so in that journey of making the transition between the hard lives outside, I mean, think about it, Jamal, that you've been roaming around the world for 20 or 30 years. You don't know where your memories are. You've been, you almost, you're traumatized.
Yeah.
And when you come home, you have a place now where you can stay. And so things like having a big home, indulging in entertainments, that you're not at war anymore. They relax, they become lazy, and they forget about the priorities of what the ideals, the governing ideals that got them to fight to liberate this country was about. And so they got wealthy, very quickly wealthy, and using their money for not the real priorities. I mean, one of them that we talked about all the time is that over 30 years, there's only been 2 public universities built in this country. Jamal, unbelievable. And you could build many of these universities with just 1 or 2 billion rand, because the AfriForum people in Solidarity has already demonstrated that. In fact, next to where I live here, there's a little practical technical university called Soltech, built at 200 million rand. And it was supposed to be built at 300 million rand. The Afrikaners organized themselves. They went to their members, about 274 or so members. They went 74,000. They asked them, they said, look, please donate 10 rand, that's the South African currency, or a little bit more. They managed to combine that, and they put a project together to build that technical university, not only under budget, but also about, before the deadlines of that construction. And they are now, it's not the only one, they're building another one, much bigger. So they're organizing themselves and they're making things happen. So to answer your question, you ask yourself, there are at least 20 billionaires among the Black people, South Africans, at least. Some of them are visible, others are quiet, who can put some serious resources and then do something to change the nature of the challenges they have. They have 5 big challenges for me. The 3 that are the big challenges in the country that are well known is extreme poverty. That's one. The other one is extreme inequalities. As you know, we talk about this all the time. South Africa is among, if not the most unequal country in the world. Top in the Gini coefficient, that's about 0.67 or 68. That's really high. And then, of course, you have unemployment, very high among the youth who are coming from universities and so forth. They can't find anything. And the other one is the crime level. Last week, the crime stats came out, and people are very suspicious of the low level of crime because they can see what they're going through. But it's very concerning. And then, of course, the last one, the 5th one, is the nature of corruption, and people are worried about it. In fact, it was part of the conversation last week when the budget speech by the minister, by the Minister of Treasury, was canceled or postponed for this coming week. The African National Congress wants to raise taxes on the wealthy, of course. But that's the general attitude, to raise on the wealthy. Very, quote unquote, people call it leftist approach and so forth. Like Joseph Stiglitz will agree with that. Paul Krugman also would agree with that. A little bit less. But at the heart of it is say, the South African government is short in the budget. They're not collecting enough taxes. This is very strange for a country so wealthy. And so the question is, if you're going to raise this, the rate you're raising it, not you think you're raising it on the wealthy, but it's going to have an impact on even the middle class and the poor people. Find another way. There's plenty of money. So the debate now is around the idea of saying, okay, is it about raising taxes or, mitigating or reducing the expenses of the government? South Africa, listen to this, according to the late Minister of Treasury, Department of Finance, South Africa has 29,000 millionaires in the civil servant being paid. Let me say it again, 29,000 millionaires. So civil servants making over R1 million.
Wait. Wait. I'm sorry, that just sunk in. Civil servants making over R1 million
a year? Yes. Which means they're getting paid. That's part of the salary, and then of course they pay taxes. Many of them don't realize that they're millionaires, Jamal, because they can't figure out what it means. You can double check it.
No, I'm just looking up what
former Treasury Minister Tito Mboweni, Minister of Finance.
Okay, so that's $53,836 a year. That's like $50,000 a year in the States.
But in terms of a reference point for us, it's $1 million.
It's $1 million. You're right.
It's more than $1 million, and people don't have that kind of money here so easily. So
I see. Okay, fair enough. Because when I see that, I'm thinking, okay, well that's decent.
So the point here is it about collecting money, or seeing what the money that you've already collecting is having the desired impact that you've set yourself up in the state of the national address when you do your strategy and so forth. And this is where the debate is, and the Democratic Alliance, sort of all-white party largely, is putting the pressure. And they seem to have a point to a certain degree, because they're saying, even if you were to collect this VAT money, VAT money, you're going to misspend it on priorities that are not really, we've got about, I think, 41 ministers. That includes the head ministers and then deputy ministers, and people are now debating if they should change the constitution to get rid of deputy ministers, because this is another money flowing for nothing. What do you need the deputy minister for? You already have a director general after the minister and a deputy minister. They can deal with that. And much of it is just the state is just ballooned with civil servants that to be paid.
Yeah.
And most of them are not capable enough. I'm not saying it. The report from the African National Congress has said it many times. Government reports have said it. So people are trying to figure out, how do we get not just more money, but how do we get a sensible, inclusive budget that is really going to have the desired impact?
Koffi,
but of course, yeah.
Well, I was just going to say, I'm beginning to think the problem with South Africa is a problem everywhere. Like, it's not specific to South Africa.
I agree.
Same thing in the U.S. Same thing in the U.S.
I agree. I've been hearing your talk with Ted Rowe, but with other people.
Yeah.
How in the world can a democratic country like the United States can allow the Pentagon not to be audited for years and years and years, and doesn't even know where 2 or 3 trillion went up in smoke? It's unaccountable for. It's unbelievable.
It's astonishing. They can't pass a budget.
Okay.
They can't pass an audit. And it's like you spend $1 trillion a year, and you're like, okay, well, you're spending more than the next 9 countries combined, and we are not at war. Like, this is not even a situation where we're at like in an active war spending this money. This is just money going out into the black, into the ether. And we do it year after year after year. $10 trillion in Iraq and Afghanistan. We got nothing for that. And it's like
Unbelievable.
that money is just being burned on the White House lawn. And you're thinking of bridges, roads, you're thinking of people who are in poverty. You think, I think of my grandmother who needed health care that we had to pay out of pocket for that we couldn't afford. Like, I think of that. And so when I hear you talk about this in South Africa, it sounds very familiar. It's very
Yeah. Well,
unfortunate.
look, we have about I know according to numbers they may have changed, but there are more than 40 million people under poverty in the United States. In South Africa, it's close to half. About 1 out of 5 people go to bed
Yeah.
without food every
Yeah.
night and every day. I mean, this is just shocking for a country so wealthy, South Africa.
And
It's
South Africa
unbelievable.
is like the leading country economy in Africa, correct?
Yes, it is. Yes, it is. Yeah. So that really, I mean, you got 17 million or so who are 17 or 19 million people who are under some kind of grant. So they get 350 or 500 or something, and it's changing all the time. And you know, the shocking thing again last year is that the parliament and the governments they say, yeah, we're going to give old people a raise. And you know how much they give them for a raise?
How much?
10 rand.
That's it. See, they pull that nonsense here for Social Security too. They say we're going to give you a raise, and it's like $5.
Yeah,
And it's like thanks.
exactly.
It's like
Yeah, I
thanks.
mean,
Thanks a lot.
it's more than insults, and for a country so wealthy, so there's some kind of need to get a hold of the treasury, figure out where the money is going, who is just spending that money on what. I mean, this year the government's come out again with another huge, well, at least that's what the president was saying in his State of the Nation address, something like 900 billion for infrastructure. He said the same last year. He said the same for the year before. He said the year before. But we don't know where this money is going because we don't see
Yeah.
the visual impacts of what this money is doing on the ground, saving people, helping them get rid of poverty and so forth.
Koffi, man, I am always illuminated by these conversations. We don't get to talk about Africa enough. So I love when you come here and we can have these conversations. Koffi Kouakou is an African
Yeah.
analyst, senior research fellow at the Center for Africa-China Studies at the University of Johannesburg. Koffi, man, thank you for this. I really appreciate it.
Thank you very much. And I wanted to say that today is the anniversary birthday of Miriam Makeba. If she was still alive, she would be 93 years old.
Now, who is inform us?
Miriam Makeba is a famous singer, struggle singer, who was married to, I think, not Al Jarreau, famous Black American singer. I forgot his name, but she was part of the struggle of South Africa using her voice, not just song, but liberation song. Very, very famous lady. You should check her up on Google if you can.
And what's her name? One more time.
Miriam. And then Makeba as in Makheba.
Okay.
Very famous struggle fighter using her voice all across the world.
I would definitely check her out. Thank you for this.
Yeah, and you probably remember a song like Pata 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 Pata. Pata Pata.
Give us a few bars. Give us a few bars. No, I'll look her up.
I'm not quite a good singer, but these are some of her songs. But you check, you will like them. She's just unbelievable. Yeah.
I'll definitely check her out, man. Thank you for this.
Excellent. Thanks again.